Hey, hey, good morning. We are back. Take two. Genesis 24, verse sheets 24, as we are about to get moving here. Let me just check and make sure that we are where we need to be, doing what we need to do. Uh, Getting my stream up just so that I can see your comments. If you come in while we are recording live, if you come in and view afterwards, we welcome those comments as well. We are going to go ahead and get started because we do have a lot of reading for today. We are at Genesis 24, where we're dealing with Isaac, Yishak, who we've met before, and we have talked about him. He is the son of Abraham and Sarah. We know from the previous chapter that Sarah has just passed away. We walked through the burial, through Abraham purchasing the land where she was buried. It was really important for him to purchase that land because this land has been promised to him, but he's settling land disputes for the future. He's getting some situations squared away for the future. But we saw that in the previous chapter. In this chapter, we see a new phase in Isaac's life where this young man, when mom dies, he's about 37, we would say thereabout, because mom's 127 when he passes. She's 90 when he's born. So we're looking at probably about 100, about 37 years old. So we talked about his name. Means laughter, that is mockery. You'll remember when his mother receives word that he's of the promise of his birth. They said the scripture said she laughed within herself, and the Lord hears her. And so this child is born, and this is the source of her laughter. But it also means he will laugh. And then we have a new person we're going to be meeting in today's scripture, Rebekah. Her name is Rivka, and it means ensnarer. In the Hebrew script, her name would be written as Rivka. Her name means ensnarer, and she adds an interesting branch to this family tree, because as you're going to read, Abraham doesn't want a wife for his children from the Canaanites. He wants a wife for his children from his people, and so he sends a servant. We're about to read it all. He sends a servant back into his land, and into his people to get a wife for him. And we read at the end of yesterday's story, there was a short set of scriptures that talked about Nahor, who was Abraham's brother, and it gave us a little bit of birth stories of, because where it comes to Abraham, that Nahor and Milcah have had children, and so this opens the idea for him, or I don't know, maybe he had the idea all along. I don't want to add to the story in that way, but however the case comes, he comes to know that his brother Nahor has a family, has descendants, has children, and he sends back to his land and sends a servant to go find a wife for his son. And we'll read how that all plays out. It's a really interesting story. So let's go ahead and get going, because we've got a lot of verses to read. Chapter 24 of Genesis is 67. So we're going to be a minute. So let's go ahead and get started. Genesis 24:1 says, now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and Yahweh, the Lord, had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, that word there, Evid, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, he says, please place your hand under my thigh. And we're going to take a second to look at that. Place your hand under my thigh. For Jacob and Joseph is one of the places where we see. We just saw it there, but the other place that we see it is with Jacob and Joseph. And when you do just do some looking, those are a couple of places that you see it. And in this story, this is where Jacob has Joseph swear to bury his bone, make sure that he's buried, not in the land of Egypt, but to bury him in Canaan. And so I just took a moment to just kind of look at that, placing the hand under the thigh. And what I was able to find was that the thigh was associated with the loins. And so it putting your hand under that thigh. In some would say that that action was you taking an oath on the seed of the person that you're talking with. Looking further, we also found that um, in the Jewish tradition, putting your hand under that person's thigh, you're putting yourself under that person's authority. You're binding yourself in a way to that person with what it is that you're agreeing to do. And so we'll see here, Genesis 47:29 says to us that when the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And so we see here that act um, of of placing your hand under that thigh. He's placing himself under the authority of his dad and under the binding of that oath that they have made. It was really interesting before I had even studied it or looked at it any further and started, just kind of seeing what that was about. I remember when I was younger and I was doing some study, the thought of like how close you have to get to someone to put your hand under that thigh. And there's almost that eye to eye contact that happens, and you're moving in close, but you're positioning yourself where I can clearly see you. You can clearly see me. There's definitely a binding together that oath makes. But then I was thinking about that, and I always, when we're reading these stories, like to kind of see like what are the implications for oaths. What are the teachings for oaths that we see in the new covenant, where things have a little more clarity. And there's some who read this and say that Jesus, Yeshua, is forbidding the taking of oaths. And I definitely see here that it's literally saying, you know, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But let's read it. I don't want to have to tell you about it. I don't have to. We're going to read it. It says again, you have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. And so what was written for the ancients was, you make a vow unto the Lord, then you should fulfill that, because it's better to not take a vow at all than to take one that you're not going to honor. It says, but I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of Elohim, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. And if you just like think about it with your like think about it, that making a promise says that you believe that you have understanding of what your time is. You have understanding of where your life is going to go. You have an understanding of your ability to make that vow. But what happens if you're not able to? It's like, no, don't make vows that you can't keep. Definitely not making a vow unto the Lord, making a vow in the name of the Lord. Why would you do that when are you certain that fulfilling that vow is actually his will for your life, rather than making oaths and vows that you're not going to keep? Because apparently there was a practice of people would make vows, and they would make a vow to something other than the Lord because they knew there was a possibility they would not fulfill those vows, or they had no intention of making those vows. And so Yeshua is addressing that here by saying, don't make a vow. Just simply live your life with integrity. Live your life and be trustworthy, so that when you say yes, it's absolutely a yes. And when you say no, it's absolutely a no, so that you're not making these vows on things that you don't have any control on, and you don't even have the ability to make a vow on the Lord. And so rather than getting yourself into a foolish commitment, why not just live in a way that people can trust your word, that you don't have to add the extra of uh, making a promise by something here on earth, or making promise on something here in the heavens, or even making a promise by the, like, you can't even control how your hair grows out of your head. You can't make a hair white or black. You can color it, you can dye it, but that's an artificial change. That's a temporary change. But he's instructing here, don't make vows, just live with integrity. Okay. So we get back here to Genesis 2. Please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord. But we're under the old covenant understandings here, and so we're reading. There is a vow made. And he says, the God, the El of heaven, and the El, God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Yitzchak. We're going to see exactly where he goes later. The servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? And Abraham said to him, beware that you do not take my son back there. Yahuwah, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this, my oath. Only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things in his masters in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And so remember, Nahor is that brother that we talked about. In the Mesopotamia, that's the area of his people. And so he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well. Remember, we went over that word Be'er when we were looking at Beersheba. We were looking at Beher Lahai Roy in the story of Hagar. So Be'er is the word for well. It says by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, O Yehovah, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also, may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Yitzchak, and by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. And so he's praying over the journey that he's on. He's praying over the assignment that he's been given, and he lays he asks the Father for this particular sign, that when I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, this woman's going to answer in this way. And it says, before he had even finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. So before he's even finished speaking what he's asking the Lord to do for him, remember, he's been sent on an assignment. So conversations already been had with the Lord about so he's just got to walk it out. How many of you know there are times when you just have to walk out what it is that you're supposed to be doing? And so just 1 second as interact with plugging up. My battery dies. We're going through. Okay. And it says here the girl was very beautiful. And uses a word, Betula, a virgin, and no man had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. And I want to take a pause for the cause here for a second to just take a sidestep to look at 3 words that are used. And many times I believe that studying the original languages of the scriptures add clarity. And but for some, if you're going to just do a lazy, quick replacement word study, uh, it can lead you into a poor understanding. And so you can't just stop at one thing. Many times you may have to look a little further to ensure that the language that you're looking at and the words that you're looking at, that they're actually what it is that you're intending to be used, because Hebrew is different from English. English, you will have a word that means many, 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 many things. Generally, if you're looking at something and there's a nuance to it, there's probably a different word for what it is that you're trying to say. And for this phrase, this word that we just looked at, virgin, um, meaning to tell us that this is a young woman who is of marriageable age and she's a virgin, specifically telling us those. There's a particular word for a young woman of that age. And so I have on the screen on the slide here there are three words that I think sometimes convolute conversations when we're talking about young women in the scriptures. And so the first word that we are going to look at is the word Alma. And Alma, this is the most common Hebrew word for a woman who is young and unmarried. The thing that I think gets missed a lot of times in conversations about the scriptures is the scriptures are telling us stories of people who were trying to get to know the Lord, who are trying to learn of Him, who are trying to learn of His ways, who are trying to get to Him. And so there is an assumption of obedience, unless you're specifically reading about a place where they were disobedient. And then you're being told about the disobedience as warning, as history and instruction, whatever the case may be. And so when they're speaking of a young unmarried woman, there there is the assumption that you understand that in our culture, a young unmarried woman is a virgin. Okay. We're not necessarily focusing on the fact that we even if you're not told that Alma is a virgin, the assumption is because she's young, because she's unmarried, because she's still most likely under the care and protection of her father, of her family. This young woman is unmarried and she has not known a man, and so there's an assumption that you understand that this is a young woman who is obedient and she is still a virgin. There's another word that is specifically used for what we just read, which was virgin. This word, betula, the word is more specifically used to let us know about virgin. It's from a similar root of the word betulum, which is the Hebrew word for hymen. I see that typo there. I'm going to fix that. And then when you see the word betula, what you are looking at is you are looking at a woman who is young, a woman who is of marriageable age, and a woman who is a virgin. Her hymen is still intact. So TMI, maybe? Nah, maybe not. Because what they're trying to tell us here is this was a pure young woman. This wasn't someone who she had been someone's wife or she's a widow, because there's a word specifically for that. This word is specifically letting us know when you see Betula, you're looking at a woman who's young, of marriageable age. And yes, because we are talking about people who are being obedient, who are trying to honor the Lord, this woman is young, she's of marriageable age, and she is also a virgin. Okay. But this one is specifically telling you that she is a virgin. And then you will see the word Yalda. Yalda is going to be a little different. And you may not see Yalda and Betula interchangeably. You may not see Yalda and Alma interchangeably, because Yalda is how you speak of a young girl who is still a child. And so that's going to be a young woman who's not of marriage age. That's a young woman who is still a child. We're not having conversations about anything related to her sexuality. We are talking about a young girl who is still a child. So you have those three words. And I just wish people would stop being weird, is what I'll say when it comes to conversations around these words. But understand that those are three words that are telling you three completely different things. Alma, you're looking at a young unmarried woman. We're not talking about whether or not she's a virgin, but a young maiden in this particular instance, this young woman is also a virgin because in previous scriptures she's going to be referred to as Betula, but later on you're going to see her referred to as Alma. Doesn't mean she's not still a virgin because we're literally just verses away. She has nothing's changed. It's just simply we're not talking about that. We're talking about her age and that she is open to marriage because she is unmarried. And then that third word, Yalda, which is telling us that we're looking at a child, someone who is a young girl. So there we have it. So verse 16 said the girl was very beautiful, a virgin, Betula, and no man had had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, I already hear a question. And so let me stop before I get too far from this place. One of the things that you have is the writer of this story has information that the servant at the time that he's there may not necessarily have known. He may not have known that she was a virgin because he was just meeting her. And so you have the person writing the story. There are places where you'll see information that the person they're talking to would the person who's involved in the story at the time wouldn't know that information. But the person who's what was told, writing what was told to them, that person has this knowledge, and so they're able to add those bits and pieces in there. So don't allow yourself to become confused when you get to those places. Understand there is an explanation for some of the things that we see as weird in the scriptures, or how would they know that? Yeah, he may not have known just looking at this young girl. He may have just simply known that she was an Alma because of maybe the way that she was dressed and that she's a young maid. So when he addresses her, he doesn't call her Betula. When he addresses her, we're going to see later, you will see the word Alma being used, because what he's able to see is clearly she appears to be a particular, those things that you can see, he's able to speak to. But the person who's writing this has deeper information, and they know not only is this woman young and beautiful, but she's also a virgin. So don't allow things like that to cause you to worry that the scripture is that there's an inconsistency there, or gee, that's strange. How would we know just looking at her? Were they walking around with signs that said, "I'm a virgin"? No. In these cultures, and I see a typo there. So we're going to get that fixed. But let's move on. Hold on. Remove. No, 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 no. Come on. Let's not do this right now. Hold on 1 second. I am checking my slides because my slides are sliding and they are not accurately reflecting what we're looking at. They should not be saying Genesis 22. I don't want that on the banner. If I can have your patience for un momento, por favor. Because it is not showing corrections that were made to those slides. Okay, so yeah, let's get that together. Okay, so yeah, that change has been made. We're going to remove that totally from the studio. And then we are going to go back and re-add it. Because what I don't want is to be talking to you about these 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 things, and then we find that the main source that you were using had an inconsistency. So thank you for your patience while I make this adjustment. Why is it not picking up these changes? Guess what we're going to do? We are going to make a copy of the entire presentation. Copy of Genesis 24. We are going to not use that one. And we are going to use that one so that we are using slides that don't contain errors. Okay, 1 second. As we continue forward here, we're going to get this added correctly. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Oh no. If all else fails, you know where we're going. We are going to go over to our Bible and just read it directly from our Bible. That is what is about to happen here. 1 second. Let's try here. Okay, if that doesn't want to cooperate, let's come here. Okay, we'll make one more attempt to add our slide. If it does not work, what shall we do? We'll read straight from our scriptures. Let's go. Share screen, window, be sorted. Let's go. And share. Boom. All right. And so where were we? We were at verse 18. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well, the air, to draw, and she drew all his camels, the meadow. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel, just like zero point 0.2 ounces, I think it was, and two bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels in gold, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." So she's exactly who he was looking for. Again, she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in." The man bowed low and worshiped Yahweh. He said, "Blessed be Yahweh, the Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brother." Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about all these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. It's interesting to me, his name means white. Many times when you hear conversation around racial matters, we never hear people talk about Laban, and his name literally means white. But you know what? We're going to keep it moving. It says, when he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels. He gave straw and feed to the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I have told my business." And he said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant." And he proceeds to tell this story in the way that many times I tell stories. He is not going to miss one detail. He's going to go back and recount for this man exactly what happened. Yahuwah has greatly blessed my master so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, "You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son." I said to my master, "Suppose the woman does not follow me." He said to me, "The Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel, his malach, his messenger, with you to make your journey successful, and you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath." So I came today to the spring and said, "O Lord, the Elohim of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I go successful, behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, 'Please let me drink a little water from your jar,' and she will say to me, 'You drink, and I will draw from your camels also.' Let her be the woman whom the Yahuwah, the Lord, has appointed for my master's son." Let's pause for a second there. Verse 43. Remember what I told you there? He doesn't call her Betula. He calls her what he can see, which is she is an Alma, a young maiden. Doesn't mean she's not a virgin. Simply means the person writing had information that the person living the story did not necessarily have. He says, "Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder, and I went down to the spring and drew and said to her, 'Please let me drink.' She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also.' So I drank, and she watered the camels also." Then I asked her and said, "Whose daughter are you?" And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him." And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists, and I bowed low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. So now, if you are going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, let me know, that I may turn to the right hand or the left. Because either way, I have completed my assignment. The Lord has done what we asked him to do. Are you going to let me take her with us? Then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. The servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rivkah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they arose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. We're at verse 55. It says, but her brother and her mother said, let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10. Afterwards, she may go. He said to them, look, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. And they said, we will call the girl and consult her wishes. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Yitzchak had come, so they're on their way back. And we see, 1 second, let me hide this right here. They blessed, hallelujah. Hold on 1 second. So we see they're on they're now, they've accomplished what they were sent to do, and now they're on their way back. It says, then Rebekah arose with her maids, they mounted camels, followed the men, so the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from going to Be'er Lahai-roi. We talked about that well, that Be'er. We talked about that well during the story of Hagar. Just for he was living in the Negev, so he's living in that area near that well. And it says, Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. Rivkah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, he is my master. Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rivkah. She became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And so that completes our reading. And I want you to be mindful of some of the things that we discussed today. A lot of reading was done for today because there was a lot of scripture to cover. But the long and short of the story is we see how Isaac has his marriage arranged by his parents to go back into, not from the women of Canaan. We don't want to introduce the women of Canaan, but what we do want is for you to go and get a wife for our son from our people. They return to Abraham's people. They meet Rebekah there. The sign that was asked for, she met that completely. And we see that this Betula, who is also an Alma, she's not a Yalda, she's an Alma. She's a young woman of marriageable age. She's not a Yalda. She's not a child. Quit being weird. She was a young woman who had not been married. And she goes into her future with her husband, Isaac. So we're going to stop right there for the sake of time. Today ended up being a little longer because of glitches. We'll go in and edit that out. But thank you for your patience with this process. And we'll try to figure out what's going on with the slides that did not cooperate with us today. And so I pray that you'll go forward and have a wonderful day, that you are productive in all that it is that you put your hand to do today, that you're able to accomplish the things that you seek out to accomplish. It looks like the sun is shining outside because it's creating havoc with my lighting. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here. And you have yourself a wonderful day. Bye.